At first glance, the clouded forest looks like one endless forest. But look closer, and you'll find several very different habitats. Welcome, or welcome back, to another episode of Pandora through a biologist's eyes. The weather is kind of bad in-game right now, so we have storm song going. But we are here in the clouded forest, which you maybe might see a little bit. You can see it's clouded forestiness. But for this video, I thought we might take a look a little bit closer at one of the large habitats we have in this game, and that is the clouded forest right here. So if we look in the game, and we can switch the map, it will show us the areas called biomes. The term biome itself in that game, in my opinion, and I think in the the broader terminology of the term what a biome is usually in biology and in ecology. A biome is generally a very large area that envelops different habitats. So the whole clouded forest itself would be a biome, and then the little areas, which are called biomes in the game, would be biotopes, or more commonly I think in English they're just called habitats. So habitats are usually on a smaller scale, and like for example you would just have this area which would be the giant's wilderness biome, which would be more of a habitat. And all of those different habitats would make up a large biome, which would be the clouded forest. So I think the game's a bit off there, but it's alright, I guess. So the plan for this video is to just show you a little bit the difference that we can find in the different habitats. So it's not just like a gigantic endless forest, there's a different variations within that forest. And so we're just going to take a look, and we'll look what we can see. We're just going to talk a little bit about the biome. But I definitely just want to show you, a little bit of the area, and I think about doing that for all of the areas, and then at some point also the DLC areas. But for now, let's enjoy it, and, let's keep an eye out at what we can find. So to start the video, I thought it was a good idea, or might be nice to show you a little bit on how the top looks. And I was hoping to have nicer weather, but I mean we can look down a little bit, and then we can already see just in the fog and in the mist and in the storm the different types of trees that we can see. So we have lots of the large mushroom-like trees over there, and if we look over here we have those conifer trees, and right there we have those reddish trees. So we can already see the different habitats that we can find just by looking down. And of course an area up here that's exposed to the elements, because we're on this big structure here, has its own habitat as well. It is part of the borderlands biome, but you're gonna see it when I travel to the ground. Same as if you've seen my life on the mountain video, that on top we have usually different plant structures, and they're very hardy plants. And the conifer trees that grow here, they're very small, so they don't grow to full size just because it's very exposed. There's probably the bedrock right here, not good soil, hard to keep, and hold at it. Of course for flyers, like that storm glider over there, it is perfect. What we also have here are these trees. And we can use them for materials. So we have another plant here, and that is this one. It's a rock orchid. And it is pretty interesting because this plant is very interactive. So if we walk up to it, well, it's supposed to close up when you... Of course, it's not working. I think the plant's broken. Well, it is supposed to close up. Maybe I can put in another video. Oh, I didn't hit her. Okay. Oh, it did hit her. Oh, that's bad. Oh, she's not bothered by it, so that's fine. But at least this one is closed up now. Well, let's keep going. Okay, I wanted to show you the Boulderlands biome, and I forgot that this is the location where the two storm gliders are, you know, doing their little storm glider thing. But what we can see with the Boulderlands biome, and again the area I was in, on top of that big rock structure, is also Boulderlands biome. If we look at the plants, they're much more diverse because it's not an exposed location. And Boulderlands, of course, because of the big boulders. We can already see some plants are similar, like the rock orchid. And then we have those conifer trees. Of course, we have storm gliders here. And we have those snakewood trees, which have those scale-like structures. Sadly, a lot of the trees and plants in this game, they don't have a name, so I can't show you all of them. But what we have here, of course, are the big boulders, and then mosses and like those little fern that grow on top of those boulders. We have, of course, moss that has a name. And we have those, wait, hold on. Mushroom structures, kind of like those plateau table mushrooms. And they also don't have a name. So being so close to humans that use that, they of course chop down the trees. Like this one. Or not. Yeah, some of the trees have names and some don't, so I usually try to see if they have names, but I think they're supposed to because I know you can harvest those cones. So I just need to. So it's a forest pine. The tree itself doesn't have a name, just the material you can collect. So we have, again, large mushroom-like structures, boulders. And we can use some of them to traverse. So this area, of course, is very rocky. The ground is uneven, so you need to have plants that are adapted to it. We have these lichen, Spanish moss-like structures. And of course, like each of the habitats, they have like certain color schemes. So the clouded forest is overall like dominated by reddish colors. And we can look down into those canyon-like structures. Because if we look on the map, if we look down, this is the way where the river goes down into the Kinglaw. In this biome, we also have these trees that we saw on top of the rock structure, but they don't seem to be as abundant as they were up on the big rock or the big mountainous structure, which could hint that these plants get kind of like they're more adapted or they're not good in direct competition with all of the other plants that we have. Oh, now you can see it closing up. Opening up, I mean. And if we go down closer to the edge, where this gorge is starting, we can see where the habitats meet. So this is still part of the Boulderlands biome. And over there we see the scarlet thicket is starting. And it's just over this way. So we're going to take a look at this one next. What we do have here growing in between the rocks are the helicocardian, those plants that are like those little worms we have on Earth. And they're right here. What is interesting, they seem to have different colors with other habitats. So here they are more like reddish orange, and I've seen some purplish ones too. But if we keep traveling, so this would be the way down to the Kinglaw, and we're going up. And we can already see why the scarlet biome has its name. It's because of these trees. So they're very large trees. They don't look as coniferous as some of the other trees. Here we have some of the native wildlife. So they are called whipfang crawlers. And they are the pack hunters that we can find in this area. I'm not gonna bother them too much. So of course we have here the river. And being this small gorge-like structure, we have probably, if there's like a lot of rain, the water's rushing down, and it will probably go up quite high here, so not many trees can grow here because they will just be swept away when there's like a flash flood. So always be careful if you camp near rivers and you see like, not many plants. That's usually a sign, or like large plants, that, water's rushing in there. And with a natural gorge like this, it is definitely a possibility. But now we're flying in the scarlet biome again. And clouded forest, again very cloudy. Here we have another of the animals. It's a bonehelm rhino. They're typical for the clouded forest, so I've seen them in multiple of the water locations. They like to be near water or swamp-like areas. Let's land here. It's not hard to see why this area is called the scarlet thicket biome, because it is overly dominated by red. We see some of the same or similar structures, like those little nameless fungus-like structures. We also have those coral fungus. They're sometimes differently colored, but you see the same base model. We have these ones, the radar mushrooms. And generally the plant-like and also the fungus in this game are very interactive, which is really nice. We have lots of wildlife here, small animals that float around. I just wish it wasn't as stormy, but I guess it's still fine. But yeah, we have this definitely a lot of the red colors in the, scarlet biome. It is more even, and there are still some boulders. And what is interesting, we have those remnants of gigantic trees that are not in this area. There's an area you'll see soon. They have like very large redwood-like structures. I hear steps. Oh yeah, there they are. So these are the small herbivores we have in this area, and they're the murdeer. They're very interesting because they have this kind of like woodpecker behavior where they just kind of like hammer their head into the ground. Maybe we'll see it. Did it get scared by the lightning? I don't know. Can't sadly look at those ones. But so with the game, we have, of course, materials we can collect, and they have materials too, like this one is the bark. Some of the trees have resin that you can collect. Oh, this one is also interesting. It's an eye thorn. And they are very interactive, so if you run into them, they like to close up. Yeah. So overall, this habitat is, as you've seen, dominated by those broadleaf trees. And it looks completely different. Oh yeah, perfect. Now I'm standing in something that hurts me. And they're called blood urchins. They seem to be some type of fungus. And they're kind of like sea urchins. So when you step on them, they hurt you. Which is probably not helped, but the Navi are not wearing shoes, usually. So one thing that we can notice when we look at it, we have those habitats. Always you can read, of course, what it says here. It says on the screen, with like what's generally, the plant life dominating there, is that of course they seem to be somewhat larger, and they have different zones in a way that could be natural to some degree, of course, like influenced by natural things. So you have the boulders would be more on the exposed slopes, and then you have in between those valley-like structures, you have the scarlet thicket biome. And now we're going to this one. Here we have the same. So if we look at this river, we can see lots of the rest of broken branches and broken trees. So which would also hint, if you just look at the structure as well, being full of rubble and not much soil, that this area here is prone to, strong currents and overflowing. And then when they're very strong, and they also kind of like rip away the soil to the side, because only here we have this hard rock bed that we can see, but on this area is the little moss and the, the green plant growth is starting. So we can guess if there's like a flood going on, the water will definitely go up to here. Like not just a flood, also like strong rain. It's nice to travel along the river because we can see where we're flying into and look at the different habitats. So here we have those large root-like structures that we can find all over. And we can see those large root-like structures or vine-like big tree thingies also in the king law. And in the king law, they seem to build like they're like some large tree that grows like in those vine root-like structures. They have reddish leaves, and the ones in the king law has green leaves. And of course, they're also good to traverse over them since they're very sturdy. So now we are in here. This little band is the white moss forest biome, and here the giant wilderness biome is starting. You can see if we spot a difference. So this here is supposed to be the white moss forest, and we can already see there's like some those fungus here. So they're like they look more like a fungus than an actual plant or tree. But I guess the game's just doing stuff. Can we look at the one in the distance? No, we can't. I'll show you them later, we'll see them. So we know that the white moss part, or I know because I've seen it, is a habitat of course, different trees and different structures and a lot of the fungus that are generally very common in the clouded forest by itself. So here we see one of those broken trees again. We have a bow fern that we can also find all over the place. These ones sadly don't have a name. And we can make our way into the giant wilderness biome, which, you guessed it right, has its name because of those gigantic trees. That I can't look at, sorry, I'm trying. The game is so inconsistent with what has a name and what hasn't. But so we have those little stagfly ants. We have another murdeer hiding in there. We have these little thingies, the dragon mushroom. They're also very interactive, so when you wake up to them, they do the little spores. We have these very hardy structures, and they'll actually hurt me, as you see. But what is interesting, those trees, they have those little openings, which is also found in the redwood trees that we have on Earth, of course. And these areas are protected, so we have some of those little mushroom structures growing on the insides, because they're more protected from the habitats than they would be when they grow on the outside. So each of these trees growing in a big biome is also, or in its own habitat, is also creating a habitat for different creatures itself. So a singular structure in an ecosystem can also be a very diverse biotope for animals to live in. Or plants, of course. So I'm going to assume that these trees are very old. It's another feral. Okay, so ferals are the bane of my video making. So these trees on Earth, the redwood trees, they can go, there's like different species, but they can get very, very old. And they're very sturdy, and they're to a degree very fire resistant because they have tannins in their bark. But what we notice here in the in the midst of it, because those trees are somewhat dense because they're so tall and they're kind of like stealing all of the sunlight, the ground isn't dominated by too tall structures, but plants that can thrive on low light. And usually fern are very good at that, which is why we can find fern mostly in foresty places. The thing I find interesting, it is characterized in game as the same biome, but when we look at the trees, we are still in the giant wilderness biome, but the redwood trees are gone here. So even though we're still in the same habitat, the same biome, it's very interesting that there's still different plants there. So we have again those mushroom-like structures starting again. We have somewhat of the same animals. And that would make sense, because animals are usually more mobile than plants, so they can traverse between habitats, especially if they're not, really being hindered by large structures such as waters or gorges. But for plants, it's usually a bit more difficult to settle, because if there's just some soil differences, completely different type of plants can settle here compared to, if we just look at this and look at this. seems to be a little bit of a different maybe, so those large redwood trees couldn't grow. They seem to be there at some point, because we can see the rocks, the remnants. So right now we're in the white moss forest biome, which we saw a little band down here, but now we are here. And one thing that we can notice if we look at it, the plants look very similar to what we've seen in parts of the Giants Wilderness biome, just without those gigantic trees, but we have the forest pines, we have the radar mushrooms, we have these rag trunk trees. Sometimes I need to look, sorry, I forget the names. We still have the fern. We have a lot of the little flyers. I think those are shimmer flies. Sorry, shimmy fly. What we do notice here, at least in this area, it is very dominated by those pinkish and purple colors compared to the more or less red colors. It's also more lush and green colored, like this bright emerald green. So different habitats seem to have, of course, a lot of different colors going on. We also find some more open spaces. We have those little yellowishy, whitish patches of, I think this is moss. Sometimes it's hard to see. What we do have is more open areas here. But again, the ground itself, we can see this, the top part doesn't seem to be having too much soil here. So very hardy plants grow. So now we are right here in the cluster pines biome. And one thing we can notice are these ones. They're called cloud pine trees, and they're clustered together like this. So what is interesting about these trees? They are definitely inspired by real-world trees, because there is definitely one tree, I think it's the Himalayan cedar. Yeah, Cedrus deodara, or if you want to pronounce the C as a K, Cedrus. But it looks kind of similar to that, so it has those sideway branches, and then the trees tend to grow up from it, like the vertical structures. So all of the trees and the plants, of course, that we see are definitely inspired, and then made kind of like alien looking sometimes. Or sometimes with those redwood trees we see it just like, basically the same redwood trees. Or if we look at those shrubs, there's definitely shrubs like this on Earth. And the grasses and the fern, of course, too. But this area, generally the clouded forest, it has a lot of smaller animals, like those kite mantis or other animals we can see flying around. That is one thing that I've noticed. It's a very long ongoing storm though. But yeah, the clouded forest is very, very foggy and misty. So it gives it kind of like this otherworld feeling. I'll see if I can find some animals here, but it's sometimes hard to see them because they kind of like, they just roam around and then you kind of run into them sometimes. Of course, we have those mushroom structures again. And a lot of these, of course, are used to traverse. Because sometimes the other mushroom structures, they kind of like, you can use to jump around. They're more like sensible when you stomp on them. Like with the spores everywhere. One thing that we can notice is, of course, it's the same with the undergrowth, because if we look below those structures, with their plants, they kind of like block out the sunlight. So their ground is definitely a bit harder for other smaller plants, I guess, to grow, because the sunlight is blocked. That is interesting. There's like some bioluminescence going on. It's nothing. It looks very interesting. I've never noticed that one. There are lots of little details in that game, which are really, really great, because if you're looking like closely. Oh, that is also something. We can get that for materials, which I need for my, making arrows. And it's more or less, it's always the same plant, but it has like a different color scheme going on depending on which part of the map you're on. Oh, here we have a definitely human-made road, because Navis don't have cars. And we have those, of course, human structures all over the place. I'm pretty much 100% at the game, so all of the structures are defunct now. But here we see some more of the murdeer. So what is interesting when we look at the map, we have of course the white moss forest biome, and it seems to go around this area here as well. And then here we have the boulderlands again. So it's really interesting where they are, because like interpreting them, because we definitely see, okay, they're here near the slope and near that slope. But then on the other side we have the white moss forest biome, so it has like, you know, different characterizations. Although if we just look at it, like from a like geographical point of view, they should have kind of like different, climatic or weather conditions, because this one is on the east side of this rock ridge and this one is off the western side with different water flowing there. So it would make sense to be actually a little bit different from each other, which it is not. But I mean, again, it's just a game and they did put a lot of detail in it. But we can take a look at this one. Oh, you may have noticed that little paw print that I had. That is because in this area you can find thanators, and I like to mark them so I know where to go. So nature has taken over this place again, and that actually can go kind of quick. I've had it with lightning trying to strike me. So Navi, as far as I'm aware, they don't have different deities, they only have Ewa, which is by itself kind of like, I think comparably would be to kind of like Gaia, like being a personification of kind of like planet and nature itself, kind of like our mother nature would be. But they don't have a lightning deity, but if they had, they're probably angry with me, the way it looks like. So here again, we're in the cluster biome, and it's like a bordering, so we see the areas border within each other. And it's really neat to see the, you know, if we look at the difference, like it's not like just like a line drawn through, it's kind of like, you know, fluid, which makes sense because that's how biomes or like in nature generally works. Unless there's like a clear-cut border, such as, I don't know, a mountain range, we don't really have that kind of like, you know, there's a sharp line that divides stuff. It's usually kind of like a fluid. Like even if you look from going from grassland into a forest, oh, I'm going into Thanatar territory because here's the carcasses. And also the bioluminescence here is, of course, motion activated, that we've seen in the plains as well. Yeah, this is Thanatar territory. And here we have the same that we had with the other biome, that we're in the border area again, and it just kind of starts changing. So behind us, we see the cluster biome, and then here we have the shift to having different trees, and it's more open again. So now we're here. It's the shallow bog biome, and it's definitely an area characterized by being kind of like swamp-like. And about the definition about the swamp, I had that in so many videos. But it's really interesting just to see the different habitats they have. And this was one, the weary swamp, that I showed in one of my videos, which by itself is not its own characterized biome, but it has the same characteristics as this one. So this area, being the swamp, is definitely characterized by some of the more tree-like structures, even than some of the other so-called swamp biomes. Because the swamp is typically somewhat forested, or there's like larger vegetation here, which definitely here is the case, but some of the other swamp, like quote-unquote, they don't really have that swamp characteristic, so they would be more like a bog or a slow overflowing river. So these trees are really interesting, because they tend to grow near water, and they're kind of like the quick heal in this game, so if I get hurt, you just kind of like eat that. In the distance we can see this greenish color. I'll show you that in a bit. It's something man-made, kind of like a toxic gas. These plants here are also interesting, because we have different types of them on Pandora. So some of them, and it says like fogbloom, like the rain thistle or sailfern, they have like different conditions to open up, I guess. So it's really interesting to have the little wildlife interacting. So it is becoming dark here, and when night's settling in and the darkness comes out, the bioluminescence starts glowing. It looks really nice having this little otherworldly sheen. And compared to some of the other parts that we have on Pandora, this area is very blue-white bioluminescence. But of course with the pink hues as well. And I really like the nature sounds that they have in this game. So right now we're still in the shallow bog biome, and I'm trying to get closer to the water. So, here we have the other type of predator, small pack hunter, that we can find in this game. That is the chameleon crawler. They're pack hunters, kind of like the viper wolves are, or the chameleon crawlers. And they're small to medium-sized carnivores. Just gonna leave them alone. So we also have bioluminescence underwater. So we have the structures of the plants here. Because on Earth, bioluminescence is pretty, like, not pretty, but it's definitely more common than it is on land. Again, sadly with the fish types, they don't really have too many separate species that we can see. Oh, I need to breathe. Sadly, they're a bit... Okay, so I'm doing the photo mode, but this way we can have like a nice little look at this little fishy. But as you see, it also has 2 eyes. And this is one of the fish that we can actually hunt, the octofin. And you can also see the bioluminescence here. It's really hard to get a good look at them, because they're like really hard to see. But it also has 2 pair of eyes. I'm not sure if it's an octofin or another type of fish. It's really hard sometimes. What we do notice when we look closely at the trunk, that the little moss here that just grows on the tree itself also has its own bioluminescence. I guess they call them petals. They look more like mushroom. So they're clearly, their model is some type of plateau mushroom. They also have the cones that you can collect. So we're in the same area still. I just did the time a little bit. I mean the storm has stopped, but now it's raining, but it's okay. We have the murdeer over there doing the little hammer thing. Now it's trying to ground itself, looks like. I like the sounds they make. But my favorite is still the arrow deer. I like those little things. So here we can see those vine-like structures again. And they like to grow around and up on the floating rocks. So I'm just gonna glance on the floating rocks in this video. But I want to do a comparison, same like I did with my Kinglore Forest floating rock. So the higher we are, the rougher it gets usually. So the trees tend to stay a bit smaller. And we seem to have like a mix out of some different trees. So here we have the snakewood trees, I think they are. Oh no, they're the nameless trees again. They look just like them because they have this reddish color. Well, one thing that we do have when we go higher up are wild ikran that we can see flying over there. But yeah, high up we can see the area is generally very rocky and dominated by those large structures. Even though it is, again, very foggy and rainy. But we can see when we look down the openness here that we of course have in the bog biome. Because with the water it kind of like blocks the trees a little bit. But it likes to drown them out to a degree. And same as with the... wait, let me land. That we had with those large redwood-like trees. The tree itself, or the land itself, can of course be a habitat. for example, for kite mantas, and they lay their eggs here. The eggs are somewhat protected from predators on the ground. Of course, like if you can get up here as a flyer or a climber, you can definitely get them. I really like the top of the tree because it kind of looks like, I think some bromeliads have this type of flower. So they all definitely are inspired by real life plants and of course animals and fungus. So here we can also see we have different colored little flowers on the ground. Got this nice little purple color.
Careful.
Up here we also have a plant that we can also find in the king lore. The flamingo orchid. So that plant is actually very aggressive and it launches stuff at you. Let's see if we can get it to do it. It's also like following me. So it sees me as a threat, but not the ikran. There's another one here. See, it was trying to launch something at me. We also have these plants. It's a mermaid tail. Oh, they have this like color lily structure at the top. Really nice looking. And you can use that to get launched. So what is interesting about this area here, because we are flying in another area of the Giant's Wilderness biome. So what's interesting about this area, because we're about to fly into the Giant's Wilderness biome, that here we also have those large redwood trees starting up again.
That's better, huh?
And of course, same with the other area, we see the coastline is a little more rocky, which again hints as the water is maybe overflowing. So when there's like a lot of rain going on, the water is rising. Here we have the kite mantas, like you can see them from above, I guess. But you notice in between the trees now, and the rain has stopped. If I fly here, rain starting up again. Here we have the animals again, it's still the stagfly ants. Oh, we can hear some of the... Oh, it's ferals again. Yeah, so that's another thing that can happen when you have dense forest canopy. They kind of like not only block the light, but also the rain, making harder conditions for plants that want to grow underneath. So of course, if one of those trees fall, completely new area is opened up, because then the sunlight and the rain can reach again. So what we noticed about this game is it's very vocal. So like we have lots of ambient nature sounds with different animals roaring. That is something like normal, especially with animals that have a fixed territory and are usually predators. They kind of like mark the territory via a mix out of scent and sometimes acoustic markings, like roaring or howling, telling others of their kind, this is my territory. And here we can see an open area that definitely grew some of those giant redwood trees here at some point, but they fell, and now we have a little different habitat here with different trees that can now grow here because the giants are gone. So what's interesting, here in this area, to the right we have the white moss forest, and to the left we have a giant's wilderness. So if I fly through, you see a little bit of a difference. We of course still have some of the same trees, because that's what I said with the, borders being fluid. So we don't necessarily just have this one type of tree there. Some trees, some plants, some animals can have different habitats, of course, which all then boils down again to if the plants can grow or not. And now over there we're flying into the border area again, where we can see in the top the scarlet thicket biome again, which is then starting here. So it's kind of like a border area of 3 different biomes. Here we have the white forest, the scarlet thicket starting up, and of course our giants. Oh, here we have a kite manta again. It's not bothered by the ikran. Sometimes my own econ is very vocal, and she's just like screaming, but my character's also talking with her. It's again rice without rain here. Sometimes I use the Skyrim method to go up a hill, but just like jumping and sideways walking, that helps. So we have here an open area in the Scarlet Thicket. So we have more of the undergrowth, and it's more green than it is underneath the scarlet trees. Oh, it's hurt.
Wait, I didn't mean to scare you.
Oh, sorry. You have those little bug-like thingies that I can't look at, sadly.
It's okay. I won't hurt you.
You can see how it's kind of like, you know, flaring up his tail.
That's it. Easy.
Kind of like a leave me alone.
Easy. Let me get that.
So we can help them, because
There
of
you
course
go.
they've been attacked by humans. It's nice because we can see them up close, and as you can see, it has like a tiny second pair of eyes as well. And now we kill it for materials, and I'm just kidding. Oh look, it's going all the way back down to hammering the ground again. Okay, so I brought us here. It's kind of like the border area where the toxic gas is starting that has been, according to the game, introduced by humans. And we can already see one thing clearly. Those are the healthy braided trees, and here we see the unhealthy ones. So they have not lost their leaves, but the leaves have turned, yes, yellow. And it used to be more toxic, I think. But there is some sort of gameplay where you can kind of like help with it.
Too much Yahweh here.
So yeah, that's what it's called, the Yahweh. Yahweh? Sorry, probably butchering it. So let's get out of this again. So one thing, of course, it has this toxic green color. It's kind of like still the Scarlet Thicket biome, but it is covered by this green mist, green fog. I don't think they tell you in game what exactly it is, but generally, you know, poisonous fog. And oh look, sorry, I'll keep going with it in a second. Just showing you this. You can find them all over the map too, so they're not just like restricted to the cloud forest. There's a second one. So what I was saying with, you know, this poisonous kind of fog, that's kind of like same with the pollution that we see in game. It's kind of like made visible for us as a player, because usually gas that is poisonous or also very toxic to some degree is usually not brightly green colored. I think with the Bhopal disaster in India, where there was like this big gas catastrophe, like I don't know, a couple decades back, I think it was just described as a thick fog because depending on the density of whatever gas it is either lighter or heavier than air, so it will either go up or it will go all stay down to the ground, and most of them will stay down to the ground, which is why they're so dangerous, because down on the ground that's where the people are. And it's really, really dangerous also with the natural occurring Lake Nyos, where the CO2 just kind of like came out of the lake and then just rolled over the people and choked them, most of them in their sleep, of course, which was also a big catastrophe going on. So, of course, the dangers of gas are something that are not just like, you know, not just for Pandora, but the green color, of course, is because, you know, it's a game and they kind of like need to make it visible for the gamers. Because if you just keep walking, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, if you start choking out of nowhere, which would be the natural reaction, you don't see it. But of course, if it's like slimy, greeny, toxic-y looking, that will scream, ooh, danger, so be careful about it. So here we have a type of tree that I have not seen anywhere else. It kind of looks like some sort of... I had an avocado tree that kind of looked similar to it. Interesting. The game is really funny because it looks like kind of like nice and clean.
Something's got you spooked.
And all of a sudden, like, the plants just come back and overtake everything, and it rusts within minutes, feels like. So we're going up there now. So the trees are, of course, very hardy. So we got those coniferous-like trees, and they kind of, like, overtake the mountain, and they can grow up there, too. Because we are going up this way. So one thing I've noticed with those snakewood trees, they definitely like to be around those more boulder-like mountainous areas, because this part is part of the Boulderlands biome, but also I think so it's Boulderlands meeting white moss. They're kind of like interfluid. And here we also have those dawn sheens showing up again. And in between the crevices we have the helicocardians again. High up we have the ikran and coronis and lots of those dawn sheen. So if you're not a flyer, that area is probably very hard to get to. I think you can kind of like make your way around. But it is very rocky and very steep. Which also leads to kind of like isolated area here. What we do have here. So in this game, I told you at some point I had the skill that I can get so close to animals. It's because we can find those thingies here, the tarsiu. So they're kind of like the ones that I don't know what they're called, like the tree of memories that we have in the movies, and it kind of like is kind of like a node from Ewa. So Ewa seems to be like this large interconnected system, which I definitely want to go into a little bit more at some point. But we can find those saplings all over the place. But yeah, this area is very protected. It is on top. Let's see if she can come. No, she can't. Well, it is a very protected area. It's hard to get to because you have to go up on this mountain, and it looks very steep. So there's like another nice, kind of like a pathway up. So you have to climb a little bit in between. So it is very protected. And it has the name of Crying Giant, with much sense because there's like waterfalls going down here. And it's a very nice area, and it's nice to see the differences because you can see the trees were kind of smaller on the exposed sides, but here in this little bowl shape, it's probably more protected from the weather. The trees can grow bigger. The water again is pretty similar all over the game. We don't really have too many different aquatic structures, so it's sadly like more of a copy and paste, and we don't really have too much unique aquatic flora. But it still looks very nice, and same goes for the fish. We just have the same type of fish more or less all over the same area, so we don't have too many variations. I mean, I guess of course it's hard to, program and put stuff into the game, but it would have been very, very nice. Well, I hope you liked that little overview, and I didn't want to make it too explanatory. I just wanted to show you a little bit of the game itself and the diversity. So even though this is all the clouded forest, we have a lot of variation in here. So it's not just like, the same type of trees and the same type of plants, all over again. We have like little variations, so we can recognize, oh, we're going from one habitat into the next habitat. Of course, it is still a game, and it is limited by, different kind of factors, and of course the difficulty it takes to program and keep everything in, and then the graphics. But it's still a very nice game, and they put a lot of detail into it, and some of the stuff is of course explained with, oh, it was just, movie idea, it's, creative liberties. But I like to still talk about stuff that would make sense and stuff that doesn't make sense. So I hope you liked it. I hope you saw a little bit of the beauty about the game. Maybe you recognized some plants that you have you've already seen in real life, and you're like, oh yeah, it has been inspired by this one. I've seen that one in real life. Well, I hope you had fun. I hope you enjoyed it. And with that, I wish you a great day, and bye!